This is a production of Cornell University.
Barbara and David Zalaznick, I want to thank them for funding our reading series, so important. And thank you for joining us on this snowy April day. Where are the songs of spring? Where are they? Think not of them, we have our music too, in the presence of Stephen Yenser, distinguished professor of all things cool, as I think of him, and director of dazzling blueness at UCLA. Stephen is swiftly learning that Ithaca isn't easy. As you might have heard, there was a fire at the Statler Hotel, and all guests, including Stephen, were evacuated from their rooms at 8 a.m. and led through the cold to the ILR Conference Center for Displaced Poets. But he's here, and he's from LA. What could be crueler than coming from LA to this rude awakening? Maybe this would be a good time to mention that Stephen's first book was called The Fire in All Things, and it won the Walt Whitman Award from the Academy of American Poets. His second collection is Blue Guide, and a new volume, Stone Fruit, is forthcoming. Yenser's other honors include the B.F. Connors Prize from the Paris Review, an Ingram Merrill Fellowship, multiple appearances in the Best American Poetry series, and Fulbright Fellowships to France and Greece. His books are A Boundless Field, American Poetry at Large, Circle to Circle, the Poetry of Robert Lowell, and another book is The Consuming Myth, the work of James Merrill. And he also has co-edited 5 collections of poems by James Merrill, and he's currently at work on Merrill's selected letters. So that's a lot. And Stephen Yenser is one of the very few great critical thinkers writing about contemporary poetry today. He combines depth of knowledge with a poet's closeness to poetry. His prose is gorgeously written and attentively generous toward the work under consideration. These strengths are especially evident in his writing on James Merrill. Merrill's work, which is so diverse in content and form, requires more than literary knowledge. It requires, I think, a kind of intellectual chutzpah, and Yenser is supremely equal to that task. His latest collection of poetry, Blue Guide, takes its title from the well-known series of travel guides, the Blue Guides. It's a cartographic tapestry built from the fabric of Los Angeles, Greece, Baghdad, New York, even Kansas. An intricate, exquisite fugue, Blue Guide synthesizes music, painting, poetry, but I can't help but think of Yenser himself as the Blue Guide to these overlapping vistas, a guide who's both reverent and mischievous, the kind who'd follow the museum tour with a quick trip to Jumbo's clown room. In jazz, a blue note is a worried note, a note sung or played at a slightly weirded pitch. And like the bent note of say, Coltrane's sax, Yenser's music is full of slippage. Spirare, which is Latin for breath, slips into the word spirea, a flower. The susurrus of waves and shore create a spindrift as liquid and solid coexist in a shape-shifting, music-making flux. The poems move effortlessly through time, space, levels of discourse, stratas of diction. In this Ovidian world, the emptiness of an MRI tube morphs into the bridal chamber. A cricket collaborates with an open-air recitation of Merwin's cricket poem. The breezy music of Los Angeles recalls the temple of Athena Nike, which in its form resembles a cycladic harp. In visual terms, the poem's surfaces are sfumato, a painterly technique that blurs edges and blends one thing into the next. Now, a blue note, and Stephen's poems are really jazzy, as you would know if you've read them. A blue note can also be a note from a minor scale juxtaposed against a major progression that lends a kind of blue coloration to the melody. And in his longer poems, such as Los Angeles Fractals, Yenser bends time and scale in a sometimes intoxicating, sometimes somber recollection of intentions connecting flights, till the poem becomes a sprawling mimetic meditation on, this is a quote, the mazed congeries of these cities, or rather, multiplicities in this non-city of ethnicities. He uses signage in a painterly way, like the glazes, scrapes, and stencils in Larry Rivers' cool and jazzy canvas. There's also cameo appearances by Romer Bearden, Dylan Thomas, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bing Crosby, Paul Desmond, and Mark Twain. And in this poem, it just moves with the poet, between the poet's habits and his habitation, his place, in a kind of dazed haze of signs and signifiers, links and linking, drinks and drinking. It expands from the smallest fractal scale to the broadest sweep of the city, with centers everywhere, like Pascal's God. It's an excessive place, the LA, can I say this? Labyrinth, okay? Licensed by a vanity plate that reads Signify. And there's so many vanity plates in LA. So Yenser, I think, has achieved Nietzsche's goal of becoming serious as a child at play. For his expansive meditations on the world's whole horde, cut to the quick. There's always a knit of identity, always a cascade of linguistic slippage in this rich palimpsest, till everything is strings that vibrate. It's a privilege to introduce one of the finest poets and critics of his or anyone's generation, Stephen Yenser.
Thank you very much, Alice. This is on, isn't it? Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. I wish 1/10 of that were true, and I appreciate the thought. I'm delighted to be here. I'm very happy to meet Roger Gilbert, too, whom I have just learned is a friend of Lanny Hammers, who is the writer of the biography, the authorized biography of James Merrill, which has just appeared, which is a great book. I urge you all to get it. And I see some Merrill's poems are up here, too, so this looks like a James Merrill day. Anyway, I'm delighted to be associated with James Merrill. I'm going to, I'm having trouble with my eyes, and so occasionally I'm going to block out my face in order to see the page. I'm going to read from Blue Guide, and then I'll read a few poems from Stone Fruit, which is the volume that is now in press. And I thought I'd start with, after I get my clock out here, a short poem that came up, by the way, in Alice's class today, because we were talking about, at least it came up in my mind, we were talking about economy and Emily Dickinson and so on. This poem, there's much more commentary in this poem than there is poem. The poem is a wisp of a thing. But it's interesting that it was inspired by Dorothea Tanning, the wonderful surrealist painter who, at the last time she was doing her painting, doing any painting, she turned at age 95 or so to poetry and wrote some wonderful verse. But she did a suite of paintings that she called Another Language of Flowers. You all know about the old language of flowers. Well, this is a new language of flowers, and the paintings she did are individual flowers, surrealistic flowers. She had 12 of them, one for every month of the year, I guess. So she got 12 friends of hers who were poets to write little lyrics to entitle the paintings, 12 of them. And there were a few rules. The first rule was it had to have the Latin name. The second rule was that it had to have the common name. And the third rule was it had to be spoken by the flower itself. And the fourth rule was it had to be very short. Okay, so this is This is called Flagrantus Speculum Veneris, which is a ridiculous concoction, meaning the burning mirror of Venus. That is the Latin name of the flower. The English name is love knot, and it's spelled with a K, but maybe the K shouldn't be there. So this is the way it goes. Don't breathe or you will miss it. I am flesh and flower that each other devour. Tongue-tied lovers know it's myself I swallow. Okay. Short poems. This is a short poem, that's why it's here, partly. It's a valediction for a poet that I knew very well in Los Angeles, Charles Gullens. Some of you might know his work. He was an early Wintersian, which is to say that he was a very formalist, very rigorous poet. He was also a Francophile. This is a poem that is strange in that Charles's dates are 1929 to 1993. I knew him for 15, 20 of those years. I knew about this poem long before he died or was even ill. And I knew about it because of his initials and because of his fondness of the French. And it happens that his initials are almost the same as the phrase that you find on French tombstones, meaning here lies someone, like R.I.P., except in French it's here lies, or C.G., which is C.G. So I felt kind of guilty about this for a long time. I had a phrase for a short elegy long before Charles was even ill. But anyway, since I had it, I went ahead and wrote it after he died. And so this is Charles Gullens, a valediction. It's in monometer, 1 beat per line. We pass, alas, CG, CG, whose life penned strife and passion fashioned from rough-cut stuff, deep mind as diamond, verses terse, faceted, tacit. I'll get longer now. I'm going to read a suite of poems for my daughter. The first one is in longer lines, you'll be relieved to know, and then I'll read another 3 from this little suite. The first one is called MRI, a trance, and I'm sure that many of you have had the pleasure of having an MRI, which is usually accompanied by other experiences. They will give you a tranquilizer, for example, if you like one, which I like, and I got. And so this is MRI, a trance, and it's for my daughter Helen. So there I am at tower imaging. Yes, I'm aging. Drugged against the claustrophobia. Oh heart, oh troubled heart, a live shell of myself, levered into the bridal chamber at last, so to speak. And I have left my metal, my watch and coins, my pen, my keys, my belt and zippered slacks, and donned a gown, and though scared stiff, been slid condemned as a condemned phallus into a pulsing place where I lie listening through earphones to KKJZ FM, playing just then the Bill Holman Quintet, playing Out of This World. Under the broadcast music and others' din, percussive, pneumatic, Dionysian, pounding in and out and in some code of its own, in some remorseless Morse, the pictures of my favorite feelings, quarters. We're looking at the plumbing, the PVC, and something called the bundle of hiss. We're eavesdropping on the heart's tick-tock, enthusiastic tachycardia. I don't know how to phrase this synesthetic cling. It's not at all clear what is happening or when. We're loading every riff with ore, maybe, or waiting to explode, or maybe make a broken consort's music of these spheres. Now, as foretold, we go through several phases or movements, although I am motionless, sedately terrified. My life aflow behind closed eyes, I flatly fail not to remember all these years ago, so long before you squeezed into our world, Helen, crawling the passageway to Cheops' penetralia to find nothing, a lidless sarcophagus, emptier skulls' eye holes. During the break between the five that thrive and sweets and train, I hear cicadas, an eerie ostinato making the breezy music of a Cretan olive tickle the ear, until I pick up your great-grandpa's blow-humming through his tissue-covered comb as we drive by neat rows of winter wheat back home. And off in that past's future, I can make out the lonesome cricket who sits in, jams in, one evening in the Sunset Canyon Recreation Center in Westwood, California, so thrilled to find his finely calibrated kind so finely celebrated, as William Merwin reads his poem called Black Jewel. And now I hear some ice cubes, all whiskied up, tinkling under Errol Garner's right hand. Or is it my father's, as he sits listening to Blue Lou and Misty on a 78, smoke unfurling from the other hand's brown Raleigh, and waiting for that last high note, pure as a tuning fork's. Minute by minute now, the tranquilizer ebbs, and to my aging, still sublunar ear, the tone finally struck is just a smidgen sharp. It pricks this bubble, although another one will one day lift and lovely drift me off with all the trances, travels, and travails that leaving you, I've imagined leaving you, ravels and ravelings, recordings, the broken string of my rabab, my souk Arabic, my taxi Greek, somehow restrung to sound in scheme and skein, notes that float across the bars, like something you chased yesterday across the lawn. Today is not that day, and so they pull me out. Paradise Cove, another poem for my daughter. This sprang from a pun that I have now seen, alas, a half dozen times at least, but I swear I was there first. Paradise Cove, place in California. My daughter in the coastal sunset asks for Plato. Plato, she begs, blue Plato, please, Plato. Finally, I understand, and rummage from the picnic basket the Play-Doh, the blue can, and the pink as well, which henceforth I call Aristotle. Aristotle, Aristotle, she repeats, then swallowing the glottal, aerosol. And there we are, playing with both ideas that there are. For one, this mixogamous world is all one thing. And for the other, this waxing unicity is always two or more, which, excuse me, two or more, which is the same, since to rub two things together in a ruddish realm is to get others, and those yet others, viz. Our daughters and their sons. The temporizing third idea, that these two are somehow one, returns us to the first. So Marcus Aurelius thought. and maybe Lao Tzu. In any event, Nietzsche teaches that each thinker's goal and due is to become as serious as a child at play, even as the sun sinks, even when again the sun is setting, or rather, here in Los Angeles, lax land, city of angles, the set is stunning. Even in it's sunning. I'm sorry, it's sunning. Stunning, even is the way that line goes. Even in ever acuter, gentler rays, that with dismays turn the horizon technicolor pinks and blues, lavenders and zincs. Helen's Zen. Today you told us how a too tight shoe gave you such a headache in the foot. In your next breath, you said you'd made a wish. I said, why don't you wait till it comes true so that it will, and tell it then? You said you didn't think you could do that. Why not? Because I wished that we would die together, you and Mommy and me. And when we're dead, I don't think that we talk. Well, I said, as for your foot, by then you'd gone ahead. I think that maybe only souls go through, you know. You know, I said, you say you know too much. Anyway, the soul, you said, I hope it has a belly button, don't you? Kids say the greatest things. If you, I didn't write down so many things, and where are they now? Tide pools. It's a poem in couplets. Quick, mystic, this is the world's profoundest mirror. The girl in any of us leans a little nearer. You lean to it this evening, Helen, Emily, holding my hand to glimpse us both, though dreamily, as like your breath that fogs my morning shaving glass, it dries up seaward, leaving sea moss, black tape grass, scary weeds. Also a puckered seam of sea spray, a pinch of which you put your lips to, then spin away. Barefoot braid swinging from a broken breaker, your shrieks bringing a cloud wisps, blush brushed color to your cheeks, then kneel again to moons and trumpets, scallops, dollars, and mermaid fans and purses, anemones and tiny stars. Another winter day, my love, when you are older, that is, when we are both older, half bolder and half colder, maybe we'll walk back down here to this place, if whose precise location traffic-y years erase from memory, no matter, since to it the sun blazes a narrow path each cloudless day that's done, and see how I could come once more to recognize this world's whole hoard one evening in your filling eyes. So that's all for my daughter, I think. I'm going to read another poem that's in distichs, by which I just mean two-line stanzas. They don't rhyme, but it's a ghazal, and some of you will know the ghazal form. It's been around for 1,000 years or so in Persian and in Arabic, and it's a demanding form. Probably shouldn't be tried in English. The first two lines have an identical rhyme, and then the even-numbered lines following all rhyme with that second line, but there is a preceding rhyme too. So you'll see that every second, fourth, sixth line you get two rhymes coming up. In the ghazal, You're supposed to sign your name at the end. And you can do this any way you choose. I'm not going to tell you right now the way in which I sign my name, but I will tell you later. So if anybody knows Yiddish, then they will know how I sign my name. It's for a friend who was in Baghdad for a long time and then exiled from Baghdad. It's called a ghazal of names because a lot of other names come up in it. So, ghazal of names. Today, my friend, when all the scarified world implies a web, this ghazal is for you, who told me that word signifies a web. The poem, by the way, is disjunctive. The couplets don't relate to each other unless they do. And if you can make some sense of them, you're welcome. It's always, I of course felt that I had some linkage, but they're supposed to be disjunctive. When Stein saw in a lightning strike the differences spreading, her insight lit up all the acts from which arise the web. Your tigresses' meandering cursives far from my rhapsodies, and yet beneath each culture's rhapsodies there lies a web. You know, because he was a weaver too, that Webster knew, because all languages are foreign, they must comprise a web. Cowpat, kuhandel, cow's parsley, la voie lactée, it's all a mesh. Scrutinize the wings, each dung-drawn, web-doomed flies a web. From their own pincer-like pararachnid vantages, egoists like Saddam and Bush presume to tyrannize the web. My friend, whose name suppressed perforce can mean physician, Vesalius showed how selfhood will just disguise the web. Ghazali, self-exiled like you from Baghdad, sought certitude. He found the cosmic soul that unifies the web. Now here I am, giddy in Yiddish, dizzy with razzle-dazzle, arch fornicator, satisfied he ramifies the web. None of you knows Yiddish. Occasionally I meet somebody who knows, I guess all Yiddish is street Yiddish, but this is really street Yiddish. And I can tell when somebody knows some Yiddish. They look away for a minute. A Yenser is a fornicator in Yiddish. So arch fornicator, Yenser, that's the way that the name is signed at the end of that poem. How you doing? Okay. This poem is called Variations on Ovid. And it is, indeed, Variations on a line in Ovid, which goes like this in the English translation. Envious Minerva's belligerent crow lives on. Minerva's belligerent crow lives on, though your beautiful parrot, Corinna, has died. It's one of those poems that's kind of built on Catullus' sparrow poem to Lesbia, and the death of the bird, and so on. So this is about crows and the persistence of the crow. It's in haiku. Which is not an advisable form, I think, in English for anybody. Alice's friend and mine, Richard Howard, used to be poetry editor for the New Republic, The Nation, one of them, and he finally had to retire. And somebody asked him why he was giving it up. He had this opportunity to publish new poets and well-known poets, and so on. He said, "Oh my dear." After a while, I just felt that I'd been nibbled to death by goldfish because of the haiku. Which little goldfish nibbling away at him. Okay, variations on it. Like mother's screaming, the crow's cause seemed to rip its own bloody throat out. Father's old crow hid in our garage till you smashed dead its dadgum head. Each dawn's hangover, the cock sang his own crowbar or two, poor bastard. Next year, a tire iron meted out to my bombed skull 17 stitches. Scorched angel fallen to pine's tip, Christmas's crow must cope with mad songbirds. Craving blackbird pie, Astrid sought out books on rooks and dug up Macbeth. But though the raven counts as crow, the blackbird's still a quick thrush, craven. When the dyer's hand rolled two cold and coal-black eyes, was the crow's die cast? Because C was K, crow is work, backward, backward, blackward, because, clause. The adamant clause, clinging to one's every word, vouches, this one counts. At the road's crossing, 3 crows pick at a squirrel who would not eat crow. The poet's host raised a dark toast. May the best dressed guest roast y'all in turn. A loud white fact here, a cockatoo cries his crew of crows through Bel Air. Black hole, the mind's eye's pupil takes bright teachers in, straight as the crow flies. There was famously a cockatoo, a white cockatoo who had escaped in some pet shop and who hung out with a bunch of crows in Beverly Hills and adjacent, and you could see him frequently, or her, leading the crows across the sky. It's a very interesting sight. Let's see what time it is. Okay, so I'm going to leave Blue Guide and read a few poems from Stone Fruit. I'll start with a Kansas poem or two and go back to the short line poems. This one is called Preserves, as in what you put up in the winter from fruit, stone fruit especially. Preserves. Nervy, sparrow-like, eyes Cherokee, blackberry black, arrow quick, picky eater, meager spirit, converted Quaker, she taught her grandson arithmetic and pruning tactics, and let him touch, through her cotton nightie, small, tense nipples. Her hands, arthritic, knitted doilies, breaded tomatoes, pureed apples, and put up apricots, while the hoarded gilts made for bright quilts, the torrid migraines counterpanes. This is a Wichita Triptych, 3 short poems. Sometimes the rain shines just when the sun rains, and that is the way it was, since that was the way it is beyond the French doors that late afternoon here in this mind's early morning, where they still fade in, that color Polaroid pastels of her prom dress, its bowl of double peonies, promising, precocious, trying to open. Their friend and he were tightrope walkers, self-taught, trope talkers, stalking jam up, arm in arm, and caroling to lucky stars of cars, bars, and rebars. The night a carousel of smoky tryst and trough, of casual arousals, cocky carousals, pitching the dark to the dark. Streetlight and moth, reader, she married both. But then there he was, in the morning's morning, soi-disant Proustian minion, aesthetic ascetic, and Kansas rube, reducing his thought to a bouillon cube no one suitably hot ought ever pour over. I'm going to read a poem that is in sections. I'm not going to read it all. Just read a few sections. It's a longer line. It's a very long line. And it's a meditative poem. It's also elegiac. James Merrill was my friend in Greece, among other places. And this is written after he died. And always when I wrote then about Greece, I was thinking about James. This is called Cycladic Idyll, because it is set on one of the Cyclades, the Kyklades in Greek, and apologia. It has an epigraph from a friend, Bill Ettinger, who said once to me, because I go over to Greece whenever I can, he says, "I don't know why you don't just go over to Catalina." I come here for the views. I come because there is no news, because things have been arranged, because I have no other plans, because there are no plans for me, because I do not have to choose. I come here for the arid, aromatic, aromantic emptiness, where one might get a grip and sort things out. Add them up, make some, compose oneself like a concerto for flute and strings. I come to be alone, because I am alone, out of season, like the few midges left, adrift on a stony island no known poet hails from. Annihilated, outlandish is that term. Annihilated is different, but only by a smidge. To remind myself how simple things can be. Simple as the music of the marble figures of the harpist and the unique double reed player. Not to mention concepts. To remind myself how when it comes to things like concepts, Heraclitus and Plato had all we would ever need. Pythagoras we can leave aside for now. I come here to learn to speak clearly, to make carefully with the right mouth parts the sounds for thing and nothing, for bread and wine, for come and go, here and now and then and there, for good evening and farewell. Because my own language has become extravagant and tra-la, trollititious, one might say. And the olives everywhere remind me indecently indecent. Because I want fewer such words to weigh, to be less wayward, so to say. Therefore less wayward and less spendthrift, less spindrift, in a word. Not to mention grave, preponderant, and dark, I come here to be struck by lightning, Because here in the right place, a thesis can be a good flat stone to sit on and not a lizard-like thing to nail down, then argue with. Because here amid abandoned villages, abundant dilapidation, there is no reason for reason, no urge to originality. Because as I wait to be transported by the bus, I read on small trucks that ply the main road the term metaphora. I come here to sit at length and read some Whitman, who adored words plain as stones, regardless of those exultant exultations of eidolons. To browse idly, to idle on in a brief, worn lexicon, to let it lead me on, because I need new old sayings, because the good ones die too soon, because bean by bean fills the bag, because I will save time, because it will not save me. Here where it twists on itself like the walkways to waylay laid-up freebooters like me and my dead friend. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my throat. I'm going to take a drink of water. This poem doesn't go anyplace. It's a meditative poem. There isn't any plot. So I ask for your patience. This is section 3 of the poem. I come here not to contemn my city's columbaria of condominiums and book emporia with their stacks of fresh books on chocolate, chock-a-block with guides to the Galapagos and Godot, and their tables laden with books on coffee tables and books on coffee table books. And not to malign the midnight supermarket's own tropic aisles with their tanned and juicy shrink-wrapped dates, their bruise-ripe figs burnished by gelled lights, oh psychedelicacies, and the racks of razors and glossy magazines and analgesics. I come not to ditch the Academy's deliciously multiplicitous pharmacon, though disembarking, I accidentally dropped into the sea my faithful DOP kit, full of the life-saving medicines that it took down, perhaps as it chose, since it seemed to leap from my hand through an opening just its size. I come here to address not deconstruction, but myself, to address myself to the oregano, a whiff on the breeze, nostalgic and heady as skunk, cropping up beside the ubiquitous retaining walls and boundary walls, built of the ubiquitous stone, culled from the fields, or axed and levered out of outcrops, sometimes faced or split, sometimes filled with scrabbled flinders, fitted, mortarless, tight as puzzle pieces, built with what would now be tortuous lifting, hugging, and lugging, done under the long, low sun over decades of decades. The stones settling in subtly, row on row, adamant and indistinct as the years themselves, by hard men, faceless and various as the stones themselves. According to lore, the discontented among them come back at night during autumn to fields pitch dark beneath the vast broadcast of stars, to monitor their work, to make repairs to those boundaries that are their bonds with this world. Each has many, many headstones, none with a name. They did not, O onanistic onomastician, make names for themselves, those men, but wallstones, and courses of them, since stone by stone makes a wall, and walls make farming, and farming homes. Homes they went back to at dusk, and maybe beat their women in the unbeatable heat, and maybe had hard or fearful sex in, as the parching Meltemi lashed the night, and the fishermen's lashed up boats apart, and anyway yelled things they sometime did not think could be set down in words, who set these stones they harvested in place for all but ever. I'm going to read one more poem. It's also a Greek poem. It's called a short one called Psalm on Cephnos, which is, again, one of the Cyclades. One does not want, O Lord, to heap up by still waters of words a cairn, but hopes to attend a small covert of tamarisk, whose leaves salty yet feathery will shed light over the thickened plot. One wants at last to seed the field, to tamarisk and mastic tree, to olive and stone, stones in the fruit, seed in the stones. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for coming out in the snow and the fire and everything. So I gather there's a Q&A here. I run a series like this in Los Angeles, and I never allow people to do Q&As. But for you, I would be glad to do it. You have any questions? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to turn you off with questions. I can answer questions, some of them, a couple of them. Questions about prose, poetry, life, literature, pursuit of happiness? Yes?
I would love to know whence your affection for the spoonerism. And maybe beyond that, what you think about the accidentals showing up in poetry.
Well, that's a very complicated question and a wonderful one. Thank you. The spoonerism, whence my affection for it? It goes along with my affection for wordplay of all kinds. You know what a spoonerism is, of course, the transposition of the first two letters in two words that are adjacent to one another, and you have heard some of them in the poems. I think I like, I don't know, I've never really plumbed the depths of my affection, but I think it must have something to do with combinations of things that make a third thing. And here you get it twice in the two different meanings that come up. One of my favorites, boy, this is a James Merrill day, is from James Merrill, who had a friend named Robert Morse, who wrote some brilliant spoonerisms. One of them is included in W.H. Auden's Commonplace book. It's a tour de force of about 20-25 longs of made up spoonerisms. And at one point in one of James's poems, he's talking about two figures that are in sync and yet antagonistic to each other. And so he notes of them that one wand hashes the other. So because of that kind of thing, I like them, I guess. And then the accidental, thank God for it. I mean, I think that's one reason why you write poems. I don't think any of us knows what's going to happen when we write a decent poem. If we know, it's probably not a decent poem. And you discover things along the way. There's this little trouvaille, that little trouvaille. So one depends on the accidental, I think, to help one get along. Looks for it, needs it. It's a great question. Okay, let's go get something to drink and eat.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.